Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It is David again. I hope that you're having a good morning, afternoon, or evening when listening to this video. Today, I'm going to share with you an experience that I had just after I had gotten home from the hospital at the age of 3. So to start, a little bit after I had gotten home from the hospital, I remember that I was brought home from the hospital with the help of my mom and my sisters. When I got home, for the first couple of days, everything was pretty normal. I didn't really sense anything strange, and I never really noticed anything odd about the apartment while I was growing up. About 2 weeks after I got home from the hospital, strange things had started happening. I remember I was put in a room with my mom, and we were sharing this room so that she could monitor me and my health to make sure that I was getting stronger instead of getting weaker, so that I wouldn't have to be in the hospital again. When I was sleeping this one time, I remember that I saw my late grandfather show up in the room. My mom was sleeping and she didn't notice anything was out of the ordinary. But I remember saying when I was 3 that grandfather was in the room. I didn't know that he died. I didn't know that he just wasn't around. I only saw him maybe twice before he passed away, and I just knew that it was him. So my grandfather that I saw was just watching, and he didn't really say anything to me, but would also watch my mom. And I remember saying to my mom, like, hey, grandfather's over there by the door, and she would look at the door then proceed to yell at me because there was nobody that she could see. So I remember explaining to her how he looked, and she became extremely quiet. My grandfather then told me that my mom wasn't able to see him, and that he was a little surprised that I was able to see him. So he would tell me to tell my mom certain things and keep it between her and us. When I told my mom a couple of things that my grandfather said, she looked at me a little confused, and I remember she got mad and started yelling, saying that I was playing tricks on her and that I shouldn't. So I never really said anything afterward. A couple of hours after our little argument, my grandfather still stayed around on this day because he told me that something strange was going to happen. So the strangest thing started happening at around 8 on the day that I had gotten home, 8 p.m. And everyone on this day, so my brother and my 2 sisters, as well as my mom, were asleep. And as everyone was falling asleep, the apartment had gotten very quiet, like eerily quiet, where we couldn't even hear the traffic on the road. It was as if somebody had completely silenced the sounds outside. And whatever sounds were able to travel from the road to our apartment window, it was extremely muffled. There was this incident where the darker that it got and the more time that passed in the apartment, I began to feel extremely uneasy, as if something really dark and malevolent was coming. A couple of hours passed, and while everyone was asleep, I was awake. I wasn't able to sleep whatsoever because there was just this tense feeling of being watched. And I remember on my bed that I was sharing with my mom, there was a small clock that would show the time, and this was around 12 in the morning. I was able to hear a whole bunch of people in the living room talking. It sounded like male voices, and even though my mom's door was closed, I could still hear these voices that aren't familiar to me talking. So when I asked my mom, who was in the living room talking so loud, she pretty much told me to go back to bed and that there's nobody in the living room. So I tried to go back to bed until something happened inside the kitchen where there was a whole bunch of noise coming from the cutlery and from the plates, as if somebody was moving around. My mom went to go check on what it was, and she wasn't able to find out anybody because there was just nobody awake. Everybody's door was closed, and it was just her. So she went back to bed, and the noise from the kitchen would happen again, and something in the living room ended up falling on the floor. My mom got up again, and I remember I decided to follow her because I was curious. When she got to the living room in the apartment, the picture frames on this cupboard had somehow fallen over, and the screen on the portrait frames had cracked. There was about 3 pictures that fell on the floor. These picture frames were placed very deep in the cupboard that it's kind of hard to knock over the photos. My mom told my sister to wake up and to take the pictures out of the frames to clean up all the glass that had broken. I remember that I saw this really, really big, shadowy looking thing, about 7 feet tall, kind of looming inside of the kitchen, and I remember I just started crying. My mom ended up getting mad because I just would not stop crying, so she would still constantly yell a lot. And I remember that I told my mom, like, there's this shadow thing in the kitchen and it's about 7 feet tall. and I remember I was pointing. My sister looked at me as well, and she said, like, there's nobody there, stop making excuses and go to bed. And I told her, like, no, the thing is, like, looking at us, and it's the one that's responsible for, knocking out those photos from the shelf. And she looked at me like I was crazy, of course, as usual, like a 3-year-old kid saying that they're seeing things. So I ended up, getting yelled at and sent to my room while I was crying. What was crazy is that wasn't even, like, half of what happened. 'Cause on that, while my sister was, cleaning everything, when she was in the kitchen, with my mom, I heard something go into the hallway and try to open the closed door to the room that I was staying in with my mom. It was making a lot of noise. My brother ended up waking up from his room, as well as my younger sister, and they were wondering, why is the apartment so noisy? Everyone, of course, went to go check to see what was going on, and they weren't able to find out the source of the noise. My mom tried to open the door to the room that we both were sharing, and she wasn't able to open the door. It was as if somebody was barring the door. And I was in the room freaking out because the shadow being 7-foot tall looking thing was in the room with me. I remember that my mom was yelling, pretty panicked, and she was saying, like, you need to open this door, stop playing games. You know that you're in really big trouble. If you're playing games with me, open the door. And I remember I told my mom, like, it's not me, it's a shadow looking thing. It's in the room with me, and it's not letting me open the door because I'm on the other side trying to open the door. And my mom was freaking out, and she asked my sisters to try to open the door, but the door just would not budge. The last thing that happened was my grandfather ended up showing up right behind my siblings and my mom. How I know that he showed up was my oldest sister said that she saw my grandfather and told my mom, and my grandfather said that there's something evil in the apartment to my sister, and that he was here to put a stop to whatever that shadow being was, that they needed to keep trying to open the door. So everybody was forcing the door open, and eventually the door did open. The moment that the door opened, the shadow being ended up disappearing. The room that I was staying in, it had this eerie, extremely heavy feeling that everybody felt. My mom was so freaked out about the situation that she did an incense sage blessing over the apartment everything for the time being ended up normal. So this is just another paranormal experience that happened. Um, I hope that you enjoyed. Feel free to subscribe, and um, I'm going to leave my contact information below so that if you have any paranormal experiences that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email. Thanks for your time and have a great day.